Welcome to the Dynasty Dugout Show, a podcast covering all things minor league baseball. Get a front row seat to the action with everything you need to know about the future stars of Major League Baseball. And now, here's your host, Chris Clegg.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome into the Dynasty Dugout Show. I am Chris Clegg, your host and the founder of the DynastyDugout.com, your source for all things prospect and dynasty information. We are wrapping up our team-by-team prospect reports. We are on to the final one, at least the final division. We have 5 left. Again, we'll be finished by minor league opening day on Friday, which is great. And then the show will transition towards being a daily show talking about all things that you need to know from the previous day of minor league action. As we enter the AL West, we will talk the Houston Astros, who have a lot of fun talent in the system. It's interesting because the system kind of gets a lot of flack. Nobody really gives it the credit it deserves. But I actually think this system is pretty good. It's pretty underrated, in my opinion, and it's one that has a lot of intrigue and players to like. And we're going to break all those down today. Be on the lookout. We'll have the new set of prospect and dynasty rankings on the site fairly soon. Before you know it, those will be there. So watch out for those. But let's dive right in with Jacob Melton, top prospect in the system. He is my 54th ranked prospect overall. Melton has a lot of talent across the board. When you look at Melton's profile, there's the potential for a 5-tool player. He just doesn't get the love and respect that I think he deserves, but Jacob Melton does a lot of things well. Very fortunate to see him several times last year as he was with Asheville for most of the year, and I got some good looks at him. Melton plays an incredible center field. He moves well. He's listed as 6'3", 208, but I think this guy's every bit of 6'4", if not bigger. And you look at the bat last year, 23 homers and 46 stolen bases between high A and double A. He's a very strong athlete. He's got a smooth swing from the left side of the plate. It's pretty effortless power when he makes contact, and that was evident by a 9th percentile EV of 106 miles an hour, which is pretty stinking good. So when you look at the profile, I think this is somebody that you should be investing in. When you look at Jacob Melton, I see someone that ultimately has a chance to really take off. And I think that he could be in Houston before we know it. Look at the contact, and I think that there are some question marks about his contact ability. But he did post a 76% overall contact rate, which is, I think, pretty impressive, actually, when you look at the overall skill set. I think that Jacob Melton is going to be a really solid asset across the board. There are some platoon splits, posted just a 653 OPS against lefties. It was a small sample, but there is potential, I think, for Melton to fly up to be a top 25 prospect and be in Houston before we know it. Let's keep going down the list. Zach DeZenzo. DeZenzo was a fairly underrated prospect coming in. Shout out Mason McRae, who was very in on him and has been for a long time. But DeZenzo was a later round draft pick, 12th rounder in the 2022 draft. And in a small sample, he has looked really, really good. Last year, he hit 18 homers. He stole 22 bases, and he slashed 305, 383, 531. DeZenzo has big power. He posted a 108 mile an hour 9th percentile exit velocity during the regular season. Hit balls at ideal angles. He had a 41% sweet spot rate, which is very, very good. That's an upper class sweet spot rate. And the average exit velocity, a really good 92 miles per hour. You look at DeZenzo, I think he's got a very discerning eye. He walks at a high clip. He does not chase often out of the zone. The biggest question with DeZenzo is what kind of contact will he make? I think that there are still some question marks about that, but he did have a contact rate at 70%, which is okay. It's livable, slightly below average, especially for a college bat in the minors. But I do think, given the whole skill set, DeCinzo is a well-rounded prospect that ultimately has the potential to be a very solid asset. I think he's already a top 100 prospect and hasn't really got the love that he deserves. So Zach DeCinzo, top 100 guy, as is this guy, Joey Loperfido, who I actually thought would potentially break camp with the team. He had a very good spring. They were raving about him within the organization. His versatility is huge. The bat's pretty good as well. He started the year last year in high A, made it all the way to triple A by season's end. And on the year, he slashed .278, .370, .510 with 25 homers and 27 stolen bases. There's power, there's speed, and there's a good feel to hit with Joey Loperfido. The power probably played up a bit due to him playing in hitter-friendly environments throughout the minors, but the exit velocity is still respectable. The contact rates, pretty respectable, 74% overall, but the number did drop in a small AAA sample to 67% and a 78% in-zone contact rate. Loperfido's a threat on the base pass, shows good speed, he's got good versatility, he's played all outfield spots, he's played some second, he's played some first. Dude can play everywhere, and I think that really helps him out, and he's going to get on the field quicker than you might expect. I think he's up within a month or two in Houston and playing a very solid role with the Astros. So Loperfido is a heavy investment for me. I'm very excited about what he brings to the table. We've hit on a couple of guys that have moved pretty quickly through the system, but what about a younger guy in Luis Baez? Baez signed in the international class in 2022, and he looked like a stud in the DSL that summer. Physically impressive build, listed at 6'1", 205, but he's reportedly up to 6'3", shows good power and athleticism. His 2023 season was a bit of a step back, but he did reach single A as a 19-year-old, and on the year he slashed .248, .357, .481, and he had 11 home runs across 255 plate appearances. Baez shows pretty respectable contact skills, and even moving to single A, the number was good. It was 73%, which is right at league average, and for his age, I think pretty respectable. Power comes easy from that frame. As I mentioned, he gets a lot of torque in the lower half. He hits the ball hard consistently. He had a home run as high as 112 miles an hour last year and had several others north of 105, and that would include a small sample. So to put that many balls over 105 is rather impressive. So I'm looking at this profile as one that I think you should invest in. I think Baez stock will soar if he clicks this year, and there's a chance that he does. Luis Baez could really have a strong year, and I think there's a potential for 25 home run pop with a decent average in OBP and even steal you a few bases. So those are the top dogs in the system, and there's actually a bit of a drop-off after those top four. Remember, they traded several away last year, such as Drew Gilbert, very solid prospect. But let's drop down to someone they drafted last year, who I like a lot, in Bryce Matthews. He's an analytics darling. It was about the perfect fit for the Astros as they love their analytics themselves. And Matthews had a very strong collegiate season at Nebraska. He went 20-20, 20 homers, 20 stolen bases, and that was while slashing .359, .481, .723. Struck out just 20% of the time. Exit velocities up to 113 miles per hour. The 9th percentile in college was 109.5, which is pretty impressive. Obviously, that took a step back with Wood, and rightfully it should. But at the end of the day, I still think there is 2020 potential here for Bryce Matthews. The contact was inconsistent in his pro debut in single A last year, but I still think he's a player that all Astros fans should have on their radars as one that could really take that big step forward this year. Moving forward to a young guy who I think is the easiest breakout pick in the system, and that's Wainer Luciano, Waner. Luciano, 18-year-old third baseman, played across the diamond actually in 2023 and was very strong at the complex. He put up really good numbers, hit 10 home runs with 8 doubles, 40 in 45 games, and the slash of 247, 345, 76 actually leaves a little bit to be desired. But at the end of the day, I look at this profile and I see someone that struck out just 18.5% of the time, walked 11%, and put up some pretty big exit velocities. So when you look at Luciano, he put up 103 mile an hour, 9th percentile, which is already MLB average. And then you think about his age, 18 years old, pretty impressive. Zone contact rate of 87% suggests the hit tool is much better than you think by looking at that batting average. So with this profile, I think he's one that takes off. He doesn't chase. He hits the ball hard. He makes a lot of contact. I am very, very excited about what Luciano can do. I am thinking the breakout is here this year. So invest in Luciano everywhere that you can. This is this guy, Jose Fleury, who the Astros really like a lot. They love what they have here in the profile with Fleury. And he's one that, after re-looking at what he did last year, I really bumped him up too. I was a little low on Fleury, and I always liked him. I saw him last year, and I was like, okay, this guy is pretty solid. But the Astros got pretty aggressive with their placement of him. He's actually going to Double-A, which is pretty aggressive considering he didn't pitch above Single-A last year. It was good. I mean, through 98 innings in Single-A Fayetteville, he had a 3.65 ERA, a 3.43 FIP, and a 3.09 xFIP. Really good. Big strikeout numbers. There's some concerns with the walk rate, but Fleury was pretty good, and one that I ultimately think is a bit undervalued. I think you can get in on him at a pretty reasonable cost. It's a low 90s fastball at the moment that touches 94, but it does come with a lot of ride, a very low vertical approach angle, which you like to see. He gets a lot of horizontal movement, and he sells the changeup well off it with a similar arm speed and nice fading action. Look at this profile. He's got a nice breaking ball. It's sometimes a upper 70s curve and a low 80s slider. Sometimes they blend together, but when they are both on, it's a slurvy kind of curveball and a tighter breaking slider. I think Fleury has the potential to be a starter long-term. I think he's somebody you want to invest in pretty soon. Let's keep moving forward with a couple of other arms that I really like in this system. Spencer Arrighetti. He is on the cusp of a debut in the majors. He enjoyed a massive breakout last year. From May to August, he posted a 2.71 ERA across 76 innings with 99 strikeouts. His first 4 starts were pretty rough, and also the last couple were pretty rough. But 4-seam, solid pitch, 92, 93. It's not a standout fastball by any means, but it's a low vertical approach angle, much like Fleury. Uses a slider the most of any secondary with good sweeping action, sits around 80 miles an hour. And his changeup was the most used secondary against lefties. It shows decent ride and fade. Fades it away from the lefties. It sits 86. And he also throws an upper 70s curveball. He has strong command, and I think Arrighetti can be a starter long-term. But the question is, when do we see him? And I actually think that's pretty soon. Jake Bloss is another arm. Bloss was a pretty underrated college arm out of Georgetown. He had a 2.58 ERA over 76 innings last year, leading to the Astros to scoop him up in the 3rd round. He got an aggressive assignment to start the year in Asheville, which I like to see, so I'll be getting some looks at Bloss pretty soon. I know our guy Beck also saw Bloss at the spring breakout game and had a lot of good things to say about him, and for good reason. Fastball is ticked up already. It was 92, 93 last year with good IVB, but that velo is up. Very solid active spin. Pairs it with a changeup with nice fade. Slider that has good 2-plane break with nice depth and sweep. And the curveball has a ton of drop, 60-plus inches of vertical movement while also having some sweep. So a nice 2-plane break. It is a pretty fun arsenal here. He threw a lot of strikes, but he proceeded to walk 15% of batters in his pro debut, which is kind of strange to see. But I do think the arsenal's solid. I think if the strike throwing returns to collegiate levels, then he'll be fine. I am not overly worried about the strike throwing ability because the arsenal is good and we've seen him throw strikes in the past. So Jake Bloss is another fun arm to dream on, as is lefty Colton Gordon. 6'4", 225-pound lefty. Spent most of the year in AA, but he did spend 9 starts in AAA. Very hitter-friendly environments, and that's important to remember with all these Houston pitching prospects is all of their environments are very, very hitter-friendly. Asheville, High A, is one of the most notorious hitter parks in all the minors. Then you go over to AA, very hitter-friendly Texas League across the board, and then AAA. That's the PCL. It's very hitter-friendly. So I don't look a lot at these guys' stats. It doesn't really matter all that much to me. I want to know what's under the hood. And with Gordon, fastball is not overwhelming. It's a 90 to 91 mile an hour pitch. He does throw a 4 and 2 seam variation. 4 seam comes in with a low VAA, 14 inches of ride, 7 inches of horizontal. Sinker gives you nearly 12 inches of horizontal movement on average. And the pitch does have good traits. I think considering the velocity, it plays up a little more than you think. Gordon also throws a cutter, sitting near 86 with short horizontal break. And then he bridges the gap there with that, or this cutter bridges the gap to the slider, which sits in the upper 70s, low 80s with really nice sweeping action. Curveball, ultimately a big dropping pitch with sweep, so a 2-plane break, very loopy, low 70s pitch. And he rounds out the arsenal with a changeup that sits mid-80s that shows decent tumble and fade. Gordon does throw strikes at a better than average clip, so those things are encouraging to see. And ultimately, I think Gordon might be a reliever just because of the fastball, but at the end of the day, I do like the potential here with Colton Gordon. Let's talk a couple more bats. So we've hit on some arms. Let's go back to the hitter well with Will Wagner, the son of Billy Wagner, the elite closer. But this time, Will Wagner is a second baseman who gets on base at a very high clip. He's been an OBP machine. With this profile, you ultimately dream on him being a guy that's on base a lot, that can give you decent counting stats. He's not super flashy, but he does hit the ball hard. I know the power numbers have not really been there, and he played just 65 games last year. He missed 2 months during the middle of the season, which certainly affected the whole outlook of his season, but he did slash 337, 425, 18, and he had 7 home runs and 6 stolen bases. He's a passive hitter that doesn't expand the zone often. He made contact on 80% of pitches that he saw. The power and exit velocities are closer to league average, but I think Wagner's the guy that will collect a ton of doubles and put up a respectable home run total. I'll be interested to see what position he lands at. I think second is his more natural place, but he has played some third base as well and played it at a decent clip last year. So we'll see what they decide to do with Will Wagner, but he's a fun player to kind of dream on, much like this next guy, Zach Cole, who I really like a lot. Cole is an interesting, kind of unique player in the sense that he has big skills. You look at the skill set, and there's a lot of pop, there's a lot of speed, but there's a lot of swing and miss too. So you look at this profile, and last year he spent time between single A and high A, and he combined to slash 258, 380, 489 with 19 homers and 37 stolen bases. The numbers really began to tick up after a slow start, and in those 70 games after June 7th, he had 29 extra base hits, 24 stolen bases, and a 907 OPS. Here's the scary thing. He made contact on just 62% of pitches that he saw last year. But the power really good. A 107 mile an hour, 9th percentile exit velocity. That's upper tier power that we're looking at. And a 91 mile an hour average EV is also upper tier. So you love to see that. I think that ultimately this may be the type of profile that is very risky, but it may just pay off if we see Cole put it all together, because the skill set is a lot of fun. He has tools for days. It's just, can he make enough contact? I think the question is, we shall see. Still to be determined there. But fun bat to dream on the upside with Zach Cole Jr. And Kennedy Corona is another one knocking on the door of a major league debut. Corona's interesting. Saw him at the beginning of the year, and he really popped off. I mean, he hit some big bombs early. He's a smaller guy, but at the end of the day, I think that Corona gets to more power than you think. He came over to the Astros from the Mets as part of the Jake Marisnick deal, but there's power, there's speed. He hit 22 homers. He stole 32 bases last year. Slash line was a bit underwhelming at 251, 331, 458. And Corona showed a pretty aggressive approach, swinging at nearly 50% of pitches, and he made contact on just 69% of plate appearances. I think the power plays up for Corona because he does hit the ball at ideal launch angles pretty often. And at the end of the day, this may be a pretty fun player that, doesn't really get the love that I think he deserves. So I'd watch out for Kennedy Corona because he's probably going to be up sooner than you think. And he might just surprise some people. I think that's going to be the case here with Corona. Shea Whitcomb, a shortstop in the system, who I think is a little bit undervalued as well. He has some good power and speed, but there's concerning contact. I mean, last year, he had 35 homers and stole 20 bases, which he was one of 3 players in minor league ball to hit at least 30 homers and steal at least 20 bases. So pretty impressive feat there when you look at those kind of skill sets and the power and speed that he offers. But the contact skills are so-so. That's the biggest concern. We know he hits the ball hard. He had a 9th percentile exit velocity of 105 miles an hour and a hard hit rate of 42%. Contact rates, though, 70% overall, 80% in zone. It's fine. It's not great. I think Whitcomb might be a utility-type bat, but could be a pretty interesting one to watch out for. Cam Fisher, however, analytic darling. Again, they drafted in the 4th round of 2023. He was out of the University of Charlotte. Put up some pretty gaudy exit velocity numbers in college, 93 mile an hour average and a 110 mile an hour 9th percentile, but there's questionable contact skills. Fisher does get on base at a high clip because he doesn't chase at all. He is one that ultimately knows the strike zone well. He is going to get on base. I am a fan of what he does, but I am concerned a bit about the contact skills. At the end of the day, this is a profile that could really take off. He hit 5 home runs in just 31 professional games last year in single A, while stealing 5 bases and putting up a near 400 OBP. I think this is always going to be a higher OBP type player who plays better in that kind of context. So watch out for Cam Fisher, draftee last year, who has an intriguing skill set. What about a blast from the past? Look at Pedro Leon. He has been in AAA forever. This could be his 4th year being in AAA. He reached AAA in 2021. Signed for $4 million. Back in the day, it seemed like he was on the fast track for Houston, and it just hasn't panned out. Leon is interesting because there's still some power. There's still some speed. The underlying data is pretty decent. It's just he doesn't make contact. The exit velocities dipped, though. His average EV dipped to 85 last year, showing some kind of poor bottom end contact, but his 9th percentile of 106 kind of showed the opposite. So he's lacking in the middle ground of exit velocities, but has a lot of lower EVs and a lot of higher EVs as well. Chase rate was up from 24% in 2022 to 30% in 2023. I look at this profile. I think there still should be some intrigue with Leon. He had 21 homers last year, 47 extra base hits, and 21 stolen bases. As I mentioned, the high-end exit velocities were good. There's still some speed. The biggest issue is he pounds the ball on the ground. So I am very excited to see if he can correct these things and ultimately get back on track and play in Houston, because it seems like he should already be there. Let's hit on a couple more names briefly. One of the bigger sleepers in last year's class, I think, was Neomar Ochoa Jr. He is a 6'4", 18-year-old prep outfielder who looks 23. He was actually just 17 at the time of draft, but has a very strong frame at 6'4", 210. He has huge arm from the outfield. He was a pitcher and put up really good velocity on the mound, but the value comes through the bat. He's an explosive player, big exit velocities. We still need to see how Ochoa can actually hit, but there's big power and athleticism. 11th round pick. This is the kind of player that I kind of want to bet on and see what happens. He could be a really fun guy to bet on. Andrew Taylor, right-handed arm out of Central Michigan. He was the second-round pick in 2022. Successful 3-year college career. He's shown the ability to pitch deep into games, eat innings, good strikeout numbers. Fastball sits low 90s. Plays up, though, due to extension from his 6'5" frame. Low VAA, high IVB numbers. Slider is the best secondary that he has, sitting in the mid-80s with shorter horizontal movement. Curveball shows a 2-plane break, while the changeup shows plenty of arm side run. Would love to see the fastball tick up for Taylor if he can put a little more weight on this frame. I think there's a chance that he could really be fun, but we still need to see a little more out of him until we are confident in that. A couple of more arms. Alonzo Treadwell, he's injured. He's a 6'8" righty, second rounder last year. He became a starter for the first time in 2023, but ultimately made just 9 starts at UCLA before he was injured. Had a rib and back injury, which kept him from debuting last year, and he's going to be a late debut this year as well. Obviously at 6'8", big extension on the fastball, 93, 6'4" release height, 20 inches of IVB. He has some good metrics on the secondaries as well, especially the changeup and the curve. But at the end of the day, I think he's just going to have to stay healthy. And I'm not sure if he can do so. Treadwell, I just want to see him on the mound. It's hard to evaluate him right now. But until we see him on the mound, it's hard to give a little bit more just knowing what he can provide professionally. But we do know a little more about Rhett Kuba, who really burst on the scene last year. First full season as a starting pitcher. And he threw 128 innings between AA and AAA. Had a 3.45 ERA. 7% walk rate, very strong. And it was backed with a 65% strike rate. Kuba shows really good feel for all of his pitches. He commands them well. Misses bats. Fastball sits low 90s. It's about average IVB, 10 inches of run. Nothing overwhelming, but it does require him to precisely command it. Changeup shows good separation from the fastball, 13 inches of fade. He'll throw a slider and a curveball as well. Curve showing 2-plane break, mid-70s. Slider sitting near 80. It had up to 17 inches of sweep, which is pretty good. Kuba really relies on command, though, for his pitches to play up. He's a smaller arm. I wonder if he can add a little weight and velocity, but we shall see. A couple other arms before we get out of here. Trey Dombrowski. Dombrowski had a really good year statistically. Like if you just look at the basic baseball card stats, you're like, wow, this guy's a pretty good pitcher. He threw 119 innings in single A last year. It was a 3.71 ERA. He had a ton of strikeouts, a 30% strikeout rate, and 7.3% walk rate. I like Dombrowski's profile, but it does come with a below average fastball. It sits near 90, which isn't great. I think that's the kind of concern here. I like Dombrowski. He's got some good secondaries in the changeup and curve, but he will need to command the arsenal well, and the fastball probably does need to tick up. But he's 6'5", 235. He's 23 years old now. I hope we'll see progress this year, and maybe he can really tick up. And if so, I am intrigued because the results were there last year, but I do want to see a bit more. Nolan DeVoe, DeVos, is an interesting arm. He's a 6-foot righty. He has pretty decent stuff. Has a good fastball, good slider. He had a solid year pitching last year between single A and high A. The results ticked back a bit in high A, but he did show good swing and miss stuff. It did regress in high A, 35% in single A, 21% in high A. The walk rates were 11 and 12% at both stops, which is a little concerning. But DeVoe does have some interesting traits that I like, and I think we could see allow him to really play up a bit. But the arm I really want to hit on before we get out of here is Sandy Mejia. Mejia is a really good arm. Mejia is one that I think you should keep a close eye on. He just turned 20. He pitched mostly at the complex last year. He got a lone start or at least one inning in single A. But the complex, 2.17 ERA in 29 innings. He struck out 37.5% of batters with just a 9% walk rate. Mejia has pretty good stuff across the board. He's an arm that I am really looking forward to seeing this year. it's certainly something that I think he could take a step forward. Looking at his assignment this year, the Astros have already released all this, which I think is pretty cool. He is assigned to Fayetteville, so single A, and then he'll probably be in high A by the end of the season. So hopefully we'll get some looks at him before the year is over, but I think Mejia might be a big climber. And I don't want to forget about this guy. It's Colin Barber, who I've been mistakenly low on, and I want to correct that because I think Barber has some interesting traits. He had a really solid year in 2022, and I saw him live. I liked what I saw. And then he was not as good last year, but he's dealt with injury so much of his career that he's going to have to show that he can really get through. If he can play a full season, then I think there's something here. Hit 11 home runs last year in 321 plate appearances. He slashed 244, 358, 433. So it's an interesting skill set. He's a high OBP guy. He's got some pop. He's got a little bit of speed. But at the end of the day, I just really need to see Colin Barber healthy. And if so, I'll feel a little bit better about bumping him up because I do think there are some interesting things to like. I think that's going to wrap us up. There are some fun names in the system, especially at the top. It does kind of bottom out a bit, but I do like what the Astros have done, all things considered. They get no love, but the farm system is still pretty good. So we have 4 more farm systems left to go. These will be done on Friday, and I'm excited. 30 podcasts in a short period of time, but we've made it, and I thank you for hanging out with me. Hope you all have a great day. Enjoy opening day if you're listening to this on Thursday, and we will catch you again soon.